our Civic Dialogue series, and I see a lot of familiar names and I see some faces, so welcome. Before we get started, I want to make sure that you all put your names and your affiliation in the chat, please, particularly if you are coming from a community college and you are requesting flex credit. This is one way that we can keep track of everyone. So if you can do that, it also allows us to see who you are and where you're coming from. So welcome to our third semester of Civic Dialogues. We are happy to welcome new and returning attendees, and I see some familiar faces and names. I'm Patty Robinson. I am the Faculty Director of Civic and Community Engagement at College of the Canyons, and I am here with Kimberly Rosenfeld, who's the Chair of Communication Studies at Cerritos College. And unfortunately, our colleague Jan Connell is not able to be here today, but we wish her the best. She is going through a medical procedure today, so we just want to wish her the very best. We also want to give a special shout out to 3CSN, who's been a wonderful supporter of this work. And we are joined today with our tech guru, Rebecca Moonstone. And so again, Rebecca, thank you very much for being here. And Kimberly, maybe just go ahead and wave so everyone can see you as well. So just to give you a brief history of how this series started, we began in fall 2020 as part of an intersegmental partnership addressing how to create a civic engagement pathway between the California Community College system and the California State University systems. We started out with a grant from Bringing Theory to Practice, which involved College of the Canyons, Cerritos College, Cal State Northridge, and Cal State Dominguez Hills. COVID hit. Everything had to shift. And so while we had hoped to have a presentation in person at that time, we had to pivot. And I know that's the word that everyone should avoid because they say it's the most used word with COVID, but we did a pivot. And so we decided, let's go in the direction of creating a type of series that we could bring people from all parts of the country and put them into this context of a civic dialogue series. And so our first semester started, it was a huge success. We had our second semester, and now we are on a roll. And so we are now happy to go into our third semester. We also, in the meantime, have received another grant from Bringing Theory to Practice, the Way Forward grant. And so we have our original team members, but we've also now added Cal State Los Angeles and LA City College to our team. So we're really, really excited about this. We started the series with the desire to foster greater understanding of civic learning and democratic engagement within higher education, and we have really been following the discussion and the model discussed in A Crucible Moment. And if you have not read A Crucible Moment, I highly recommend that you Google it. It's a publication from AAC&U that came out in 2012. We have wanted to do this as a way to inform and inspire and engage others, as a way to also introduce students and faculty and staff and administrators to some of the leading scholars and researchers and practitioners of civic learning and democratic engagement, not only in our own state, but across the country. And what we've done is that this has allowed us to create an interest in civic learning and democratic engagement. And just for your own FYI, our sessions are recorded and they are being archived by 3CSN. And so you can actually access previous presentations, but this will also be part of that repository. And so today's presentation is comprised of two parts. Our first part is the first hour with our guest speaker today, Dr. Melissa Marino, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. You can certainly unmute yourself later in the presentation. You can also write your questions in the chat. Kimberly and I will be monitoring that. And then also after Dr. Marino's presentation, Kimberly and I will hold a deeper dive. And what this will allow for us to do is to really go back, look at her presentation, reflect upon it. And so again, a great way to just go into depth with her presentation a little bit in more detail. There are three guiding frameworks that we want you to keep in mind that the series really revolves around. We want to advance the understanding of the intersection between equity and agency and civic engagement to promote the public good. We want to recognize civic community and democratic engagement as a high impact practice, and we want to leverage participants' knowledge to build capacity to innovate for local and global change, not only in your communities, but also on your campuses. And so with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Moreno. But before I do so, I want to provide a bio of her. So I'm reading here Dr. Moreno, and she would like to be, in this presentation, be referred to as Melissa in the bio. So Melissa came to the California Community College system in 2008 after 23 years as a small business owner in law, hospitality, and real estate. She joined the Santa Barbara Community College District as a founding director of the national award-winning Shinfield Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Santa Barbara City College. She created leading-edge experiential components for the center, such as the Enlightened Entrepreneurship lecture series, which featured luminaries such as the founders of Patagonia and Deckers Outdoor Corporation, and created the Enterprise Launch Program, where students engage in the rapid development of a product of service in a single semester. She authored a practical guide to a rapid startup, which shares the success of the Enterprise Launch Program. In 2014, she was promoted to Dean of the Santa Barbara City College Business Division and launched the Santa Barbara City College Career Center or Skills Institute, an award-winning and innovative non-credit flipped classroom concept that partners with local employers and adult reentry students to strengthen the skills of the local workforce. Industry partners include Cottage Health, LinkedIn, UCSB, and other large local employers and workforce development and the local workforce development board. As dean, she worked with Santa Barbara City College Foundation to raise funds and support programs. In 2017, Dr. Moreno was promoted to vice president to create the Santa Barbara City College School of Extended Learning, and continues to experience unprecedented growth and has created more than $5 million excess dollars in revenue in only 2 years. In 2020, Dr. Moreno joined the San Mateo Community College District as the president of Skyline College. She is currently bringing transformative change to Skyline College through the People's College Initiative. I intended to create a lasting, healthy campus climate by democratizing its governance structure to center the voices of the students, faculty, classified professionals, and management, and to bring cohesion to the anti-racism and equity work that we're all envisioning as the foundation of a civic-minded campus. So with that, it is with great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Melissa Moreno.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patty, and welcome everyone. And I see so many Skyline College faces, and so welcome to all of our district friends and family. So I'm excited to present to you this very new initiative, and some of our Skyline College and district colleagues will learn even more about this new initiative that we are attempting to bring forward. And so I'm planning on talking for, I'll try to be done by say 10:40 or 10:45 so that we have time for questions before you do a deeper dive. And so this idea of the People's College Initiative, I refer to it as advancing anti-racism, participatory governance, and climate review as a democratic construct. And so, Kimberly, thank you for moving our slides along. I'll cue you as we go through this. But when I joined Skyline College as its president a year ago, it was a little terrifying because I purposefully stepped into this role without a vision. And I was thinking, I've never stepped foot in the district. I'd never stepped foot on campus. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I was fully remote for the first full year. And so I thought, it's time to set aside ego and the hubris of coming in as a new president and knowing what you wanted or what you needed, right? And so I really did engage in a true listening tour. And I know that term is kind of thrown around, but it really was genuine, because I needed to hear from our campus community. I needed to understand the multi-college district, which was new to me. And so this is no lie. It's was 1,200 Zoom meetings and trying to get to know people in this remote environment, and creating, the trust and the openness so that people would tell me the truth, because that's what I really needed to hear. It's like, where have we been? Where are we now? And where do we want to go? And so I spent my first year doing that. And it was like literally nerve-wracking, almost terrifying, because I also didn't want to be known as the president without a vision. And so I had to stay in that space intentionally until it gelled for me, and until something came forward for me. And certainly that's what happened. So here's what I observed. I mean, I came into an incredible community. I was so excited about the mission of Skyline College, which is globalized and talks about transformation and is just super simple. And so, the things that I noticed was that Skyline College was full of incredible talent that does great work. And we're in the Bay Area having, access to so much talent that we're able to build a team that is just second to none. And so, when you come into this work in a community college system, you adopt the existing team. And so I couldn't have been more floored, more impressed with what Skyline brought to the table. And there is a focus on grace and love with the team. And we are all thankfully still engaged and passionate about the work. And, what I had worried about, because, when we get to the next slide, is, when you have gone down a road that's sort of negative for so long, that I worry about not being engaged and being apathetic instead. And so Skyline College was leading the state in equity praxis, and we have the Equity Institute, and this was out in front. And we also were still open and excited about what was next with a new president. And Skyline College puts students first, and we transform lives, and innovation had been a way of being. So what I heard was a little bit more depressing. And it was a little bit like we had been through some trauma as a community. And our participatory governance in particular had been referred to as a secret society. And so that was something that you want to go back one. Thanks. So our participatory governance had been referred to as a secret society. That's not good, because we all know that participatory governance is the law of the land for the community college system, and that we are charged to operate as a democratized institution. So what I was hearing about our participatory governance was troubling. And what I was hearing about how decisions had been made was also troubling, that there was a lot of maybe unilateral, or at least it was perceived as being unilateral. And we may have been engaging and consulting with our constituency groups, but the communication wasn't clear around that. There was sort of a mutual anti-faculty and anti-administration sentiment that I was picking up on over listening for a year. And we were having difficulty being able to articulate how were we being benefited by our anti-racism and equity work? How were we measuring that impact? I heard a lot about how our constituency groups of faculty and classified professionals felt like their voices weren't being heard. And there was a lot of one-way communication. And we also had, on my first day as president, I had a climate review report in my lap that hadn't been, I guess, processed. And so this was something where, I suddenly, as a new president, had to take ownership of a negative climate review and decide what we were going to do about that. I'll be talking about that in more detail. And then all the while, the gap in our performance of our hyper-marginalized students group was still persisting despite all of the great work that we were bringing forward. And so I started thinking about how is all of this connected? And so I just immediately felt like I needed to place the participatory governance work up front. And that was the priority, to start sort of unpacking what that was. And I was very pleased to know that we had a participatory governance structure. By listening to everyone, you would have thought we didn't have one. We did. We had a beautiful participatory governance structure. I think it wasn't followed in its truest sense. And so that first year, I started to kind of dabble in a little bit of the work that I saw that needed immediate attention. And so, Kimberly, if you could advance to the next slide. So the participatory governance work we did that first year was, by the time we ended the academic year in May, it was transformative. And so one of the things I observed is that our college-wide governance council, it's called College Governance Council, had seats around the table that voted, and it's a recommending body to the president. And the president had a vote, and 2 vice presidents who sits on the president's cabinet had votes. And I felt like that was double dipping, because you have a college governance council that's supposed to consist of the constituency groups across campus that vote in their recommendations for final decision to the president. And so if I'm sitting there voting on what's being recommended to me, that just didn't make any sense. And so ultimately, by the end of May, we decided as a group that we were going to dismantle the votes of president's cabinet. And that was really had an incredible impact on the value of the other voting constituency groups. Suddenly the value and the impact was so much greater for everyone else, aside from the president and her cabinet. And so we really recognized the 4 constituency groups that we're going to talk about, but it was the students, the faculty, the management, and the classified professionals. We also had this, visual of what our participatory governance looked like. And it was a typical hierarchical structure with the president at the top, and then it went down to faculty, and then classified professionals and students at the bottom, and everything was very traditionally visualized. And so we literally shredded the hierarchical structure. I worked with a team, and we came to Faculty Senate and said, well, what about this revision to the hierarchical structure? And faculty basically were like, no, still doesn't work. And so we brought it back to the drawing board and shredded that hierarchical structure and came up with a new visual, which was very circular. So Kimberly, you can go to the next slide. So look at this beautiful visual. I mean, there's just no hierarchy in this visual. And so this is something that the faculty got behind and loved, and how this came together. And so it's just a very simple visual of the 4 constituency groups coming together to form our College Governance Council. And so we basically have a 2x2 structure, voting structure here, where everybody comes around the table, and president's cabinet is there, but as ex officio non-voting members. And so this really, many of our institutions may already have this structure, but Skyline didn't have it. And so this was really transformational. And it started to sort of open up conversations around, well, wait a minute, what is College Governance Council? And it really isn't a secret society. And so the other thing I did around this is I sent out campus-wide emails inviting everybody to join our College Governance Council meeting. And we opened it up to have quote unquote public comment from our Skyline community. And so these small steps, maybe simple steps, really kind of set the foundation for what we are focused on next. And the next slide shows our participatory governance model visualized in a different way that had never been visualized in this way before. And so we have a number of college-wide governance committees. And so those committees work together. And I think, we're still communicating this out because a lot of this happened over the year and at the end of the year. So there could be people on this call from Skyline College that maybe haven't seen this or know about this yet. But our governance committees basically work on specific areas. Like we have an institutional effectiveness committee, for example. And so they will work and come to College Governance Council with action items. Governance Council votes on those as recommendations to the president for final decision-making. In addition, our governance structure stated that if the president doesn't agree with the recommendations that are coming forward from Governance Council, in other words, the president must agree, but we can't, if we don't agree, then I have to put in writing a rationale of why I'm disagreeing with the recommendations that are coming forward. And then also we kind of define the role of our senates and councils that are independent bodies and independent decision-making bodies that bring forward information, reports, and sometimes action items to College Governance Council. So we had an anti-Asian hate resolution that came forward from the Senate, a collaborative resolution that came forward that we actually had an action item to adopt. And we created a work group that will eventually bring forward those recommendations in how to change our culture and action to support our AAPI community. Next slide. So then I had this quote unquote confidential climate review report that I told you landed on my lap as on my first day as president. And it was assumed to be confidential. And I knew from prior experience that climate reviews, well, actually, nothing is confidential in the community college system. We're a public institution. Everything is public, except if it's a draft of something. Drafts are non-discoverable, and or if it's a confidential personnel matter. Everything else is public. So here I am sitting on this climate review report that was really highlighting some major issues at Skyline College. And it contained confidential personnel information. So it was sort of all mixed up. And so I had to do this work of owning this as a new president, even though I had nothing to do with its creation or the incident that resulted from the hiring of the consultant to do this climate review report. I owned it as a president. And the things that I heard about this was that people were very upset that they had taken part in a climate review report and then never heard anything after, and nothing was ever done. And so what I did was I hired counsel right away and I said, look, I want to release this because it contains public information, but I need to redact the confidential personnel information. And so it ended up that I was able to redact very, very little and still be true, keep sort of the true meaning and the true value of the document. And I released it in College Governance Council, and we created a climate review work group so that we could go through and decide, were these recommendations worthy of consideration? And the climate review work group decided, yes, all of these recommendations were worthy of consideration. And we brought them, after a review of them, all forward to the College Governance Council for implementation. And we're going to continue this work now under the auspices of the People's College Initiative. Next slide, please. And then also we did a bunch of work around our anti-racism initiative. And so what I heard around this is that we had a lot going on in anti-racism at Skyline College and in equity at Skyline College. And it felt a little siloed efforts. The connectivity between what we were doing wasn't really there. And so we're still kind of grappling with, how we have interconnectedness around all of these efforts that we're doing in anti-racism and in equity. And so the college adopted a pedagogy to address our anti-racism efforts called intergroup dialogue. And maybe some of you have engaged with Dr. Christy Ford and Dr. Charles Bailing, but what this is, I've been, just to kind of give you an idea of what this is, I'm a trained attorney. And so as a lawyer, we go to law school and we learn how to listen to debate. We learn how to listen to argue. We learn how to listen to respond. And intergroup dialogue sort of retrains us in how we listen to each other. And so we're all engaged across the college, across cohorts, in learning how to have dialogue, how to listen, so that then we can bring forward dialogues. And this fall, we're bringing forward dialogues to have the difficult conversations. And in that room are people that have been trained in intergroup dialogue and understanding that how we listen is to listen to understand, to listen to have empathy, to listen for the sake of listening, to hear other people's stories and to understand where people are coming from. Because if you can't do that, then you can't have a meaningful dialogue and exchange around difficult conversations and courageous conversations. So that was the first year. And I have to tell you, thank God, I emerged with a vision, because I was nervous about that. And all of this started to gel for me around what Skyline College needed next. And the major concern here for me was that we did not have a democratized institution. We were not operating under a true democracy. We were not following the laws around participatory governance in the truest sense. And so this is where I started to also think about the student experience and how are we showing up in an environment, in the learning environment for our students, when we don't really have it together as an institution. So that was really where the piece of being very concerned about our student and the learning environment and how are we showing up for our students. And so my thing was, we have to get this right. How do we show up for our students if we don't have our own house in order? And so the vision is on the next slide. So we're going to sit on this next slide for a little bit. And, again, I had this vision, and this is really just a framework. And we're at the very beginning stages of this. And this is why many people, maybe from Skyline on this call, might not fully understand what this is. And so what I did was I started to have this vision, and I decided to write a letter of interest for an IEPI grant, which is the Institutional Effectiveness Initiative Partnership at the state level at the Chancellor's Office. And so I sent a letter of interest with this framework, and it was accepted. And we have our first team meeting. So what the IEPI does is they give you $200,000 if you're accepted, and they send a team from the Chancellor's Office that's, from colleges throughout the system. We have our first team meeting next Friday to talk about this framework. And so there's this place, I feel like at Skyline right now, we're in a little bit of a disruptive place because people don't know fully what this is. I am intentionally not being directive about it because it's the People's College Initiative, right? So this is about the people of Skyline College coming forward and fleshing out this vision. And, I often say presidents are around for 5 years, but faculty are around for 30, classified professionals around for 30 years. And it's like, how do you participate in shaping your future of what Skyline College looks like over the next 20, 30 years? well after I'm gone? And how do you ensure that you've sustained a democratized institution and that can't be toppled just because a new president comes in, right? And so this initiative basically is premised on this idea that if we get our anti-racism and equity right, if we get the participatory governance right, and we engage in regular climate review and not be afraid of climate review, because I know there are many presidents in our system that don't like climate review because they so often come back negative, like the one that I had on my lap when I started my first day. And so because it comes back often negative about the administration. So people are afraid to engage in regular climate review. And so my premise is that if we get this right and we engage in regular climate review, and we actually pay attention to the results of the climate review, and we analyze the results, and we be strategic then, and those results inform us how we be best at what's next, then we might transform the culture and climate of Skyline College, where we have a healthy work environment. That is so important. And what I'm getting is that our workplace environment isn't as healthy as it can be. Our employees aren't on the same page. And so then that helps us show up for our students in a healthier, more democratized way. And so I'm going to sit here for a little bit and describe this visual, and some of the faculty are now referring to this as the Lotus Flower Initiative, not really knowing fully what it is, which is fine because maybe it means the branding is working, but I want to just talk about the symbolic meaning of the lotus flower. So the lotus grows in the deep mud far away from the sun, and sooner or later the lotus reaches the light and becomes the most beautiful flower ever. So for me, this is a symbol of purity, enlightenment, self-regeneration, and rebirth, which is where we are at Skyline College. We're entering a new decade and a new way of doing things. And so I feel the characteristics of the lotus are a perfect analogy for the human condition at Skyline College, that even when its roots are in the murkiest of waters, the lotus produces a beautiful flower, symbolizing that we can overcome pain and prevail in a healthy environment where all voices are heard, clarity and guidance is provided, and a commitment is made to transparency and openness. So I spoke already about empowering the constituency groups. So you can see the names of the constituency groups around the outer part of the lotus flower, where the students, the classified, the academic senate and management council are now empowered to really be the centered voices of our community. And then I've also thought about how when we remove the vote of the president and her cabinet, what impact that has on cabinet and me as president is that we need to now engage more often and more intently with our constituency groups if we want them to support the initiatives we're bringing forward. So my challenge right now is to ensure that all constituency groups are in favor of moving the People's College Initiative forward. And by the way, I haven't heard a single objection yet. And then the 4 petals, we talked about anti-racism and equity and participatory governance and regular climate review, but there's this 4th petal, which I think is the most challenging of this initiative, because it's how do we become an institution that ensures students graduate with a civic mindset. And so can we advance a few slides to that one with the highlighted? So I go back to this question until we get it right for ourselves. How can we get it right for our students? And so I want to talk more deeply, because here we are in a civic dialogue, more about the challenge of the civic mindset, which starts the next series of slides. So this is our ultimate challenge, I think, at Skyline College. So next slide. I found the crucible moment that Patty spoke of when she before she introduced me. And this is just such a great document. And I hope everybody on this call takes a moment to read it, because it really helps answer some of the questions around the People's College Initiative. So it talks about the civic ethos, civic literacy, civic inquiry, and civic action. And so the way I'm looking at the civic ethos is, how do you really solidify and sustain a civic mindset in terms of how the institution is governed, and how employees feel that their voices are heard, and how students feel that their voices are heard. So I feel like if we get the participatory governance, anti-racism and equity, and climate review efforts right, we will have a healthy, democratized institution. But these last three, I kind of lump into a civic mindset of literacy, inquiry, and action. And next slide, please. Is this an obligation we have as educators to graduate students with a civic mindset? And especially considering recent revelations of our fragile democracy. And so as we think about graduating students and students entering into their communities and local governments, students need the skills to uphold our founding principles of democracy. And is this a primary obligation as an educator, especially considering how community college system was born to be democratized institutions? And so I'm asking these questions that I don't have answers to, and I'm hoping our Skyline College Academic Senate faculty and students come together to answer these questions. Is it important to graduate students who understand what democracy is and why it's so important, so that they have civic literacy? Is it important to graduate students who are self-advocates and solution-oriented, who understand that changes within reach and within their locus of control, which is civic inquiry? And to graduate students who are change agents and social justice warriors who act to improve the lives of others, which is civic action. And all of those together is sort of this civic mindset that I'm talking about. And yet our other primary obligation is to close the obligation gap. And I can talk about why I use that obligation word in a minute, for our most hyper marginalized student groups. So the reason I'm using that word obligation is because we have authors who wrote Minding the Obligation Gap in our district, who wrote this fantastic book that centers the work as an obligation of the institution to make sure our students are succeeding. And then the last slide here is, I guess I'm asking for thought partnership in answering these questions. Thought partnership with you today, and thought partnership within my own institution, as between students and faculty and classified professionals and management. So how do those two obligations intersect and support each other? And I feel like the crucible moment kind of helps us answer that question. And the greater conversation is around how to contextualize a civic mindset across the institution. And so if you go to the next slide, it's back to the lotus. And I didn't talk about community engagement, but community engagement is part of this. We have a president's council, and that consists of our local civic leaders, and how are we going to engage our community in this work. And so that, in a nutshell, I guess, is what the People's College Initiative is. And we have so much work to do. And so maybe in a couple of years from now, because it's going to take us 2, 3, 4 years to get there, I can come back with some data and tell you how it all worked out.
That is wonderful. You know, I'm looking at this, and I just want to say, Dr. Moreno, I am so pleased that you're referencing a crucible moment. I started when I started this work that I'm involved with, my position about 5.5 years ago. Actually, it was 6 years ago that I read that document, and it literally changed the trajectory of my academic career. I highly recommend that everyone take a look at it. Again, published in 2012. And many of you probably saw the announcement that just came out from AAC&U just at the beginning of the week, that there is a whole new initiative that is focused around civic learning and democratic engagement. And it really is building on that original work of a crucible moment. And so definitely take a look at it. You can Google it. It's 136 pages, well worth the read. So with that, I mean, this is a lot to think about. I mean, an amazing process that you're going through, huge change. And I'm sure there are folks that would be looking at this from other campuses going, oh my goodness, how is she going to pull this off? But it is an amazing vision. And so we want to make sure questions that people have, and certainly you have. Oh, and I see. Thank you, Elaine. You put the PDF there. Thanks. And Elaine is from California Campus Compact. So Elaine, thank you for joining us today. So questions we'd like to ask Dr. Moreno. Please feel free to either unmute yourself. You can, raise your hand. We can call on you that way, or certainly you can put your questions in the chat. Either way, let's open it up here because a lot of great stuff. Kendrick, yes, one of our all-time favorite folks that keeps joining. I think you've been to just about every dialogue, Kendrick. So yes, please ask your question.
Hello, Dr. Moreno, when you say that not all faculty or the staff or the community is kind of in line or getting it together, can you kind of describe that pushback and how you were able to overcome that to make that change in that faculty or staff to kind of be in line with the goals of Skyline and the anti-racism and everything else? If you don't mind sharing.
Of course. And there is just one kind of footnote I'd like to say about the crucible moment. That was written in 2012. And there is, since then, we've had our statewide chancellor, Oakley, put forward a call to action for the work of anti-racism in the institutions. And so I feel like we should update crucible moment if we can, because anti-racism and equity are most notably absent when you read that document. And so I just wanted to point that out. And thank you, Kendrick, for your question. So I think part of how I've been able to, at least so far, not hear an objection to moving the institution in this direction around the People's College Initiative is really by listening to people. And I've sort of, in so many ways, taken, if there was a fight, taken the fight away. That, sort of those concerns that came forward in my early days around how the faculty voice isn't being heard. And by making those, small but very significant changes to mute the voice of the president and the cabinet, which was in how I understand it, maybe more central than what I personally feel it needs to be. I think we center the voices of faculty, center the voices of our students, center the voices of our classified professionals and management council. And so in a way that sort of takes that, I mean, you can't argue with that. Every concern that people have brought forward, I didn't argue with. I'm like, wow, that's significant. Let's address it. Let's think about this together. Let's solve this together. And so I think that this approach has been very empowering to our academic senate and to our classified senate and to our students. And students are also engaging more because they're excited about this. I mean, every single student, in my view, that was born after 1987 was born to be a social justice warrior. And so they're very excited about this as well. And so I think it was, I mean, I can't think of any, unless other people from Skyline want to speak to this, but I think it was about me listening and then empowering.
We have a question in the chat. Melissa, let's see. I assume the name of the initiative, the People's College, has symbolic value of some sort. Can you please talk about what inspired you to use that phrase for the title of your talk? Yeah, well, I mean, I started, as I was formulating this vision, I did a little bit of a history lesson for myself, like how is the community college system set up? And they used to be called democracies colleges. That's how we started. And the People's College to me is a play on that. And it's by the people, for the people, of the people. And I think Vertus Robinson, who came and spoke at our opening day this semester, he says, with the people. And so the People's College to me means our college is owned by the people. We're a public institution. And who am I as a president to say what we're supposed to be doing? We need to decide together our future and own it and have it be sustainable so that it doesn't fall apart with a new administration, right? And so, because all of those complaints will come back, the negative climate reviews will come back. And so I'm really thinking about this as the constituency groups shape the future of Skyline.
And again, please feel free to either raise a hand or put your question in the chat. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing, Dr. Moreno, that is so important, and you alluded to the fact of our students being social justice warriors. And we know that the literature shows that our new Gen Z students, they are so focused on wanting to make a difference. They are, I don't want to use the term activist because some folks would take that in a negative way, but they have concerns. They are concerned to make a difference and they want to make a difference. And so I think being able to have students be part of this, to hear their voices, their concerns, their passions is key to making this work. Because again, those students are so important.
Yeah, sorry, Patty, to interrupt you.
Oh,
I just wanted to let you know we have another question in the chat here. Let's see, from Dora. How did you get all those constituency groups to speak honestly and to build trust with them to answer and respond to your listening tour?
Oh boy. Well, I have to say, I think the challenge of a career was coming in as a president during a pandemic while we're all on Zoom. So very difficult to get to know people in this environment. Like, there's something that's lost in the 3D world, which we're seeing because now Skyline College is coming back to in person. We're interacting in person for the first time. And so so I would say the challenge of a lifetime, trying to enact change from a Zoom room. But also, I think there was some advantage that I had of not having any history in the district and not having any history with Skyline and convincing people. I think they could see it. And I think hopefully you see my authenticity today in really wanting to help and make things better and coming in without judgment, because I was open and coming in without a vision, which I think I expressed earlier was so difficult for me to be so long. A year was like, felt like forever to not really have a vision gelling for what our campus needed. And I think that all of those conversations paid off. And, I came into a lot of spaces saying we start with trust until trust is broken. And, what choice do we have here? Other than to be honest with each other. And it's like, I can't be a mind reader, and I can't effect change without hearing what's really going on. And I think we just sort of together dismantled some of the fear around having open and honest conversations. And we had a lot of conversations that weren't recorded. We continue to have conversations that aren't recorded. And so, you know, I feel like, yeah, I'm still building trust across the campus, and that work is never done, you know.
And then looks like Catherine has her hand up.
Thank you. I am a member of see, I just lost you. Hold on. I'm a member of Skyline College, and I just want to say, one of the things that, in an interesting way, I just want you to say that part of our culture here at Skyline, I've been here for 16 years, is that we've never met a new idea we didn't like. We're always really open to new things and trying new things. At the same time, I think that when we did our president search, we had a very inclusive search committee. And I was asked to be the co-chair of it, and that was really important because as someone who'd been at Skyline for a long time, I knew I had a sense of what we were doing well and what we still needed to do better. So what I think is we got that started that way. I think that what Melissa has said is absolutely true in terms of her coming in without baggage, without preconceived notions, so that we had an opportunity then, in a sense, to start fresh. But again, what I think she's done, she has been the change we wanted to see in our world. And that's on one of our buildings. That's one of the things that's close to our hearts. And I think that she is putting that into action in ways that allow us then to open up and move forward.
Thank you, Kate.
That's a wonderful quote.
I know, it is a wonderful. We have about 3 minutes left. So if there's just maybe one last question or comment someone might like to make. If there isn't, I'm gonna throw one in about your intergroup dialogues. I would love to hear more about that. It sounds like Doctors Ford and Bailing were both brought in from off campus, and kind of how did that work and how did people respond to that?
Yeah, so this is ongoing work. So we brought in Charles and Christy to do training with a cohort of about 35 people. And then we decided to do a train the trainer model because Christy and Charles aren't expensive, right? And it's like, how long can you sustain having experts come in? And I love the idea. I mean, we have so many experts on our campus with PhDs in critical race theory. I mean, it's like, we're very fortunate to have the expertise in our family, I guess, at Skyline. And so we did a train the trainers. I think now we have 14, something like 14 people trained to be trainers. And then we did intergroup dialogue training for the president and the president's cabinet. And Christy and Charles were like, they couldn't believe it. They were like, most presidents just want to know what we're doing out there, but they don't actually do it. And we did it. And it's intense. I mean, it's a way to open your mind and your heart and to share deep personal stories so that you get to know each other, and it ends up having this effect of team building and trust. And so now we're bringing a management council into a cohort. It's 16 hours of training that's going to be facilitated by one of our new trainers. And we're going to just continue to go across constituency groups. And part of the money that I want to use for the People's College Initiative is to make sure that adjuncts get paid to participate in this kind of training, and that classified professionals have an opportunity if they need to do it in overtime, right? And so it's about, you know, your budget is your mission statement. It's putting my money where my mouth is and making sure that we are providing the resources in order to get everybody trained in intergroup dialogue, so that then we can move forward as an institution with what I really want is to have a common expectation of how we interact, no matter what gathering space you show up in at Skyline College.
Thank you so much. So Patty, you want to take us to wrap up here?
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you very, very much, Dr. Moreno, for being here today, kicking off our series for fall. This has been great. I think certainly given everyone something to think about in great depth with regard to changes, and those changes can be made. And so certainly I would also ask, is it okay if folks have questions, and if they, at some point, if they wanted to reach out to directly, would that be all right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Perfect. Because I have a feeling some folks are probably going to go back and say, I have some more questions here I'd like to ask. So with that, again, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who want to stay on, you can just go ahead and stay, and you're going to be, we'll have the deep dive that Kimberly and I'll run. But I also wanted to let you know that we will have our second speaker next week. You'll be using the same registration link, same time. We're going to be welcoming Elizabeth Clay Roy, who is the CEO of Generation Citizen. And I think you will all find her presentation very, very interesting, especially to learn more about this incredible organization that started at Brown University. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Moreno, again, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Okay, so those of you who are still with us, I'm going to get us kicked off for our deeper dive. And if you have to leave, thank you for joining us, at least for this first hour. And hopefully you can find the time, maybe in another dialogue, to stick around. We have a Google document, sorry, that I'm going to screen share, but I'm also going to put a link to it in the chat. Can you all see this? Let's keep our fingers crossed I can get this to work. Seems like I have technical difficulties every now and then with this stuff. Let's make sure you guys can all access that. Could you click on that link in the chat and see if you can open that document? Works, nice. So I'm going to scroll down in it to a sign-in sheet. Looks like it's appearing on about page 2 here. And if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to sign in with your first name, first and last name, your college, and your role. And then if you could share just one comment about the previous Melissa's talk, basically, whether that's something that stood out to you or really got you thinking or raised a question for you or even a concern. I mean, I was really intrigued by her intergroup dialogue, which is why I asked about that, but I was so happy to hear a little more. So I have some things to say about that. But if you could,
Really?
yes.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I opened the document, but it says to request access.
Okay, that happened. So I'm going to do that right now. Hold on. Anyone, let's see. Oh, restricted. See, it's very strange. It reverts back. So let me get you guys. Okay, does that work now? Try it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you for letting me know, Kendrick. So before we dive in, we're going to just talk about some community agreement, just guidelines for having a productive learning experience together. So we ask that as you participate in your groups, that you stay open to new ideas. I think this group, we've always had a nice open-minded group who joins us. Use an asset-based language when speaking about students. So we don't want to really talk in terms of deficits. Speak from your own perspective, and do respect the viewpoints of others. So listen respectfully and attentively, and withhold judgment about others' views, and be willing to voice your disagreements by criticizing the idea and not the person, and ask questions no matter how simplistic you might think they are. And don't make assumptions about what others think or what they mean. And if you have additional suggestions, we encourage you to put them here. So I think those are just nice reminders. I think we all probably been exposed to these kind of reminders in the past, but they're always nice to refresh especially sometimes in our climate or with our topics here, we can get, we can get heated in our viewpoints and discussions. So
May I also suggest someone type in the document if possible, because the document froze on me. What we say here stays here, kind of like Vegas rules, especially in the group, small groups as well, because sometimes the heated moment, people talk afterwards and say, I can't believe this so-and-so said that. And I think it would be nice to just keep those rules, even with our emotion and feelings after the fact that there was some disagreement for a certain concept. So
great, thank you, Kendrick. And do try to get that document froze if you can. You might want to open it in another browser. So we're going to get ready for breakout rooms. I would like to I'm going to read you the prompt. You have it all in front of you, but it will be repeated because there is a document. If you notice this, please open this link. I'll show you that in a moment, but I want to first read kind of what we're going to discuss here. Share your reflections on the previous hour's talk and then discuss the relevance and implications this has for the guided pathways work on your campus, and which pillars could be strengthened by implementing ideas inspired by Melissa's talk. As a group, you're going to add a few comments to a Google slide that I'm going to show you in a moment that summarizes or encapsulates your discussion. And you're going to pick a spokesperson. So when it's time to report out, we don't sit in silence, everyone pointing fingers at each other. Someone's ready to talk. And we have this great graphic, thanks to Jan Connell, who of the guided pathway 4 pillars. If you're not familiar with them or you just need a refresher, this is what we're talking about when we talk about the 4 pillars, which is clarify the path, enter the path, stay on the path, and ensure learning. So I'm going to scroll back up here and show you this link, and I will make sure you guys all have access to this. You should, but Google likes to give me trouble sometimes. So what you'll do, I've just repeated the instructions I just read to you here. So I'm not going to read them again, but if you need a refresher, and then you'll just pick a slide for your room that corresponds with your room number. So if you're in the room 1, you'll fill in slide 1. If you're in room 2, you'll fill in slide 2, etc. Is that clear to everybody? Any questions? I'm going to make sure you guys have access to that document because I'm going to get ready to put you in breakout rooms in just a moment. So you guys should be able to access this, no problem. Can you all see if you can access the Google Slides? Open that link up and just kind of get in there and let me know before I send you off if you're having trouble. I can't create the breakout rooms, but I think Rebecca or Patty can, because you guys have hosting powers. Unless you want to make me a co-host, I'm happy to do it. But maybe Rebecca can do that for us.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was also a host. I apologize.
Maybe you're not. It doesn't say it by your name. So maybe it's just Rebecca who's our host. So Rebecca, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh,
yes.
Now we can.
Okay. I am having technical difficulties. The technical person is having technical difficulties.
You want to make me the host? I'm happy to put them together unless you've gotten through the technical difficulties and want to do it.
I am trying my best and
Okay.
I cannot even do that. So what I'm going to do, and I'm hoping it doesn't kick everybody off, is to log off because I can't even assign someone.
Oh no. Okay. Usually it won't kick us off. So we'll wait for you. Okay.
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 All right.
So
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. This happens.
Yes.
So while Rebecca's doing that, why don't you continue on that Google document? Make sure you can get the PowerPoint open. If you have other comments and you can read through. Yeah, can you have a bio break? Absolutely, Paula. If anyone needs to step away.
Yes, if you have to use the restroom, please.
Absolutely, 2 hours is a long time, but we just don't want to lose you. So hang tight, Rebecca will be back. And just make sure all the ducks are in a row and you can take maybe this little extra gift of time and read through the comments as well as, again, that guiding framework for today. And then Patty, let's put the link to a crucial moment in our shared document.
Somebody actually did. I put the title, but Marissa actually added the link
Okay, I'll
right
add that
here.
then.
So again, just highly recommend that everyone take a look at this. And if you recall, you're going to see some familiar names that were part of the action team that wrote that document. And we've had a couple of them speak as part of our series. Karen McTighe-Musil, who is now retired from AAC&U, was instrumental in putting that document together. And so many of you were here last semester when Karen spoke, and then certainly you can go back and Google you go back to the archive where her presentation for Civic Dialogues is housed. And so you can actually hear Karen talk about civic learning and democratic engagement.
Yeah, and if you scroll down to the bottom of not the Google slides, but now you have two documents open, right? The shared Google document, at the very bottom, we have resources. And as they come up in the talks, I usually populate this, and you can populate it as well. But I've put the Crucible Moment link there as well. This document you'll have access to after the talk today, and it's downloadable, and you can use it as your own resource as well. So let's see if Rebecca makes it back. Oh, she is. I see it.
She's
Rebecca,
back.
you're back. Okay. Are we ready for our breakout rooms? Oh, maybe she can't hear us. Oh, I'm now the host.
Oh, you're now the host.
Okay. So let me go. I'm going to go ahead and make the breakout rooms. And how about Patty, time frame on the breakout rooms?
We typically give about 15 to 17 minutes. So should we go 17?
Okay, so let's maybe do, all right, let's do it. Here we go. I'm going to create, I may shift around if there's some, if you get moved at the very beginning, it's just me kind of shifting the participants in a group. So here we go.
So we'll go to about 11:34.
Okay, 11:34, here we go. Opening up. So we've got room 1. We've got a total of 4 rooms, about 4 to 5 people per room. So you'll probably see a prompt now asking you to join your room. And remember, you have the prompt on both the Google Doc and your Google Slides. So the first thing you'll want to do is decide who's going to be our note taker and who's going to be our speaker, and then maybe reread the prompt to the group. That would be a good way to start.
I don't see it yet.
Oh, how about that? Can you guys see it now?
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yep, so here we have it. So you should be able to join now.
Welcome back, everyone.
So if Patty's still with us, she's going to lead us through a debrief. And if you could just put in the chat your breakout room number and who's going to be your spokesperson, that'll help Patty as she goes through the rooms. So,
and Kimberly, I think our group failed. We weren't following those instructions. We got in such a great discussion. We didn't pick out our person. So I was taking down some notes. So I'm happy to also reflect on our with our group as well.
Okay, thanks, Patty. So group 1 has already got Dora's in there, and group 2 is Dr. Hurtado, and just keep adding groups. I think we had a total of 4 groups.
All right, so let's take a look here. I apologize, pulling up my chat. So group number 1, Dora, colleague of mine, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having this event. This has been awesome. So let me just share a little bit about what our group talked about. We have it up here, but so I'm going to read it. So we have this a new president joined a new campus. I love the fact that she was vulnerable and saying that she had no vision for what this campus climate was going to be, and that she was open to listening and building relationships and trust with her community where she was and is. And she didn't go in with any preconceived ideas, and I think that's what made it possible for her to be able to start this transformation of this campus. It was just inspiring to me to see these actions that Melissa is taking. And I love the fact that she didn't say like, because like she had her cabinet be trained, which is, that's general, that's just saying that, you know, we don't know it all. And we're participating in this transition as well by educating ourselves on how we can do this work and make it happen on our campuses. So on our campus, and that was like total commitment to learning and how this would relate to guided pathways. I was just making the observation that in my campus, it's a very same groups, the same people participating in some of the same groups, especially when it comes to equity and like how do we bring all those folks that really need to be in those rooms? How do we get those people to get in there and have those conversations? Hearing what Melissa was saying was inspiring to see how she's doing that, and you know, hoping that we'll be able to take these things back to our campus and have them maybe be that transformational person in some of these groups to help plan as we're continuing the work of guided pathways to bring everyone together on the same page as how it relates to equity. Because I think oftentimes groups are thinking, let's just build this system without thinking about how it's going to affect our students, because we haven't had those difficult conversations and people don't want to have those difficult conversations because they don't know how. So I think that, and do it safely in a safe environment. So hearing about this inner dialogue conversation training is something I would like to bring back to my campus and share, like, how can we get this all of us to be on the same page that are working in all these different groups to really help our students with the guided pathways discussions that we're having on our campuses. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. And yes, I think that whole topic of dialogue, so important. And I want to come back to that at the end here, but let's go ahead and I'm going to see with group number 2. Let's see. We have Henrietta from Cerritos. Hi, Henrietta, how are you?
Hi, let me unmute myself. I'm doing well, and you, Patty?
Fine, thanks.
Awesome. So I am looking at what we shared in our group, and what our group had to say was, so communication, of course, came up. Communication for all, holding open forums, public comments during BOT, student activities, and academic senate meetings, or events like the annual equity retreat. Collaborative learning process, add more critical reflection and discussion to expand the equity retreat purpose. We have this awesome equity retreat, but it only happens once a year. So it'd be awesome to continue that effort throughout the year. Equitable solutions like applied and contextualized learning in our course assignments, and hire more counseling faculty to ensure that all pillars are sustained in the system of higher ed community colleges, which has been pretty much the same since the 1960s, and guided pathways is meant to change that. But it would make a huge difference if we had more counseling faculty. Like at Cerritos College, we lost 9 full-time counselors in general counseling, but the counseling faculty or faculty full-time period are not really being replaced. So how is that helping guided pathways? So that definitely, I think, needs to happen, and that would help the collaboration also with the academic departments. And then collaborate with all high impact programs like UOPS, Puente, Moja, Veterans. Be open to new ideas, as our speaker shared, and implement the concept our student success framework has at Cerritos College and the iFalcon, to be open to new ideas. And then the beauty of distance education, that after all, it is helping us make it a more equitable and global and accessible and sustainable system, and use of more open educational resources. That's what we shared.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Again, I'm just looking here and I'm just jotting down some notes. And so let's see, Kimberly, we had just the 3 groups, was that correct?
I thought we had 4, but Rebecca can confirm that. She's host now, so she'll have to open the. Rebecca, did we have
So-
3 rooms or 4?
We did have 4, but
Looks like
that the 4th one is, oh, Paula.
Okay,
so. I can go ahead. Hi, Paula.
Oh,
I can go
yes,
ahead and just
you did
report
that
out
one.
for number 3. That was our group. And I apologize because we actually, we got chatting and we didn't put our comments on a slide. But I took a bunch of notes and we were just, the first thing that just sort of took us off and running was the whole idea of dialogue. That people were actually talking, that they were having conversations. We also were quite impressed with the fact that Dr. Moreno was talking about having all their voices be heard. And what was so interesting were the folks who basically were opposed to that. There were people who actually did not like that. We also talked a lot about that idea of giving up power. And it really came down to, in some of our cases, looking at, who's at the tippy top of this power structure. And those are the folks who are most nervous about giving up that power, but yet that's where we can see the most change happening. We also talked how important it was with the issue of how she said, folks would be compensated and particularly bring adjuncts into the conversation and give overtime to classified folks, which was just like, wow, that's an amazing idea. And how great is that when you start to think about fairness, that now you're compensating people for their ideas, for their work, and how fair is that? And also, that the other big flip is having us define what's going on. I mean, that is such a mind-boggling change that you're not having this come from the top, but it's coming from everyone. And in most cases, what oftentimes happens is that people really don't know where to go because they haven't been given that kind of ability to have that kind of input. So what we came up with was that this obviously is a huge paradigm shift. It is giving everyone a voice, it's everyone a space, and really having the opportunity to be a part of this. And I think what's most important is when she said, this is also how it'll keep it sustainable. So incredibly important. And I think all of that benefits to guided pathways because when you're bringing in all the voices, you're not having this be decided by a handful. And Mike made a really good point of saying how, for example, the work that he's doing in his own department, bringing all the voices to the table. That's how then you can hopefully have the students stay on the path, and ensure that kind of learning. You can't just have it come from one area.
Can I just add to that, Patty, because it's very inspirational what you're saying is, this tendency to put guided pathways in like the counselor bucket.
Yes.
Like, oh, that's counseling, right? And it really should be a community transformation of the college at every level. And I think sometimes that does get lost. And so even Melissa's discussion of having her executive cabinet go through the intergroup dialogues. And I mean, even that action right there speaks volumes about we're all in this together and it's not a top-down initiative that's happening here. It's, it's a horizontal collaboration that we're in, I think speaks volumes. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I'm going to share my screen again for group 4 because they did put some stuff on their slides. So
I can speak to that, Kimberly.
Yay. Oh, please do, Rachel. This is my dean at Cerritos.
Well, we didn't get very far either because we got it. We got shoved around in different groups. So by the time we got done, we ended up having this discussion. So this is really kind of a broad statement that the model, all the things that the president in her talked about, it really creates or brings more inclusiveness all the way around to each of the pillars. And this model would then support all these pillars, being mindful of an equity mindset and helping us, or how are we engaging with each other, and all the programs would be represented if this were to happen. And even though this is a broad statement, but having been with LCP since its inception, I can tell you we're not that far down the road, and we've got a pretty good model at Cerritos. But if you look at the state initiative, I think if the state were to grade the colleges, we'd all probably get a D, if not an F, maybe a couple with a C, because knowing the intent of where we're supposed to be with LCPs, part of what is not happening is that discussion. So something has to change. And I think President Moreno, in her way she's going to bring that dialogue, it's going to bring everybody, because LCPs are not for the elect few programs or elect few areas. It's supposed to be moving all programs, all students. And what happens is the programs that don't get included, they kind of like, well, it doesn't affect me, and they're not engaged. They don't know about it. And that's one of the experiences I see at Cerritos. And so sometimes when I've been bringing this to our division meetings, people kind of like, well, who are these people? Why are the counselors coming? What are they talking about? And it's kind of sad because we've been at it for several years, and yet the knowledge of this just really isn't out there at the groundswell where it needs to be. So you have to ask the question, and why not? And part of it is because it's not inclusive of all constituents on the campus. So something has to change. So I think the way she is designing that campus and the new leadership style would really impact this thing across the board. That's what we got to say.
And Rachel, I'm going to make a comment to that, because this also came up. I think Dora had mentioned it, that, you know, it's and also Kimberly had said that oftentimes this is really sort of given and expected that the counselors are the ones shouldering this to a large degree. And I think also that we see that it going to your comment is that so much of this work in some ways, and not intentionally so, but I think it's just the way it's kind of happened, it is become siloed. So there are certain groups on campus that are now sort of taking the charge to lead this, where rather than saying, okay, but this needs to be coming from everyone. We need to be hearing from adjuncts. We need to be hearing full-time faculty. We need to be hearing from students. And so then this really is that collaboration. That is that people's college, that everyone has a voice in this. But I think it's also endemic of the kind of structure of the community college itself, and going back to what she was saying, that this is just the way we've been doing it. We've been doing this for how long? And it's like, if we're really going to make a difference, and if we're going to go back to that original idea of democracy's colleges that was discussed in the 1947 Truman Report, it's like, let's take a re-examine this and say, how do we, again, have all voices be part of this, that this is truly a democracy, and in this kind of institutional setting that we call the community college. And certainly, again, it goes back to that original civic mission that was reported in the Truman Commission. So again, just a part of all of this.
You know, Patty, you're absolutely correct. And what's interesting to me, when you look at the state initiative, or I call it the mandate, because I've seen how the state operates, you know, they ask the colleges to do something. And when colleges don't do it after they get asked X amount of time, they mandate it. And so here we are. And so what nobody's talking about is, this is a paradigm shift. The intent of LCPs is a paradigm shift in how we manage students coming into community colleges and funnel them through to complete an education. But nobody talks about that. And that paradigm shift is going to fundamentally change the way we operate programs. And nobody is talking about that. But that's the intent of this. But nobody's talking about it. And why? Because not everybody is at the table. Nobody recognizes it. Now, when I have a dialogue with one-on-one with one of my chairs or two of them, and we discuss this, like I had one come in and said, tell me about this. How is this thing really working? So when I explain it all to him, he goes, oh my God, you know what? In a couple of years, my department doesn't need to exist, or it's going to fundamentally change. Absolutely, because it has implications for departments, how we schedule classes, all of these things. And nobody's really talking about that.
No, and I think, Rachel, part of that, it's just, we look at it as a mandate, and it's like, oh, another box I've got to check off. We got to show we're doing this, got to show we're doing this. But unfortunately, we don't think in terms of what's the bigger picture. Absolutely. And how do we intentionally make this work for everyone. Paula, you have, oh, I'm sorry.
Patty, to your point, you know, how do we make it work for everyone? And we're not, but why is that? Part of that is because we don't have everybody at the table to understand the mission or the purpose, you know. So the point is, here's where we need to get, and here's how we're going to do it. And through this process, all of these other things are going to change. We're going to leave them behind, and this is going to be the new model. And at the end of 5 years, this is the way things are going to look. But nobody's talking about that, because We just don't talk about it, including everyone and having everyone at the table. And I think it's kind of sad that it does get relegated to counseling, because I know it's not, but when I bring the counseling people that are really in charge of a lot of this stuff, a lot of the faculty kind of look at them like, well, why are they here? What are they talking about? No, they don't kind of internalize that this is happening, that this is the way the programs are going to go. And I don't know what to do about it, because I've been at it for like 2 or 3 years and I can't seem to make a dent in it to communicate that. But part of it is because it's not top down, because it's not a wider discussion on a broader plane. Anyway, that's all I'm saying.
Paula, I know you had your hand up.
Well, I was just going to kind of put two things together that everybody's talking about and that Rachel touched on with regard to reporting out on our group, but I think all the groups were kind of saying the same thing. But her articulating the fact that GP is a opportunity to shift the paradigm in terms of how we support students. But what we're saying here, and I think what we've been able to experience through Dr. Moreno's talk today, is that paradigm shift has to also include a paradigm shift with how we communicate with one another as employees and students, especially those students that are on student government. And I would include in that our student workers, because they're often passed over, but oh my God, they are part of our employee makeup. And at the end of the day, that's all we are, is employees. Like, we break ourselves apart into, academic senate, classified professional senate, management council. We're all just employees, and we should treat each other, with that kind of mindset, that we're privileged to be there. We're only here because the students want something from us and we think we have something to give them. But I think that the paradigm shift with regard to how we relate to each other with in that civic democratic mindset is key. And that has to happen, because if it doesn't, and I think that recognition that Dr. Moreno started her initiative with, that people, employees, feel burnt. They feel it's not burnout, it's a moral injury, that we are, and we don't have a voice. And this participatory and shared governance structure for many of us is BS. And people are just like, so unless, and I think it has to happen at an executive management level. Because when you're in a position where you feel your voice doesn't matter, and you do your service to communities, you do everything that the state lays on us, from BSI to the C program, everything, one thing after another, and now we have guided pathways, and yet you're not listened to. Or in our case, we have a saying of, well, management's going to do what management wants to do. It doesn't matter what I say. I mean, it feels good to be able to sit at a table and talk about cool stuff. But at the end of the day, if your voice really doesn't count and you don't really see, and it's not transparent, you feel like you're just spinning your wheels. And so people go to ground, and I know my classroom, my students, I teach, this is where I'm at. I develop curriculum. Okay, you guys run the college, I'll be doing this. Thank you guys for listening to that.
No, it's about relationships. Relationships are key. And one last question, Kendrick, I know you have your hand up.
I just want to comment on Ms. Paula, what she was saying. I mean, I certainly have felt that at various community colleges I work for as a part-timer. We're like the freaking flyers. But forgive me, I may sound biased, but from my experience at Cerritos College, it has been very positive in terms of the conversation that I've had, or the transparency, and I really appreciated that. And last year and during spring semester, I also really appreciated the the support regarding anti-Asian hate and what happened in Georgia and what happened with all this stuff that's been going on. And I appreciated the college to really say, hey, let's have some healing circles. Let's talk about it. Let's put support for the Asian faculty and community and the students, because, you know, this was a huge increase in microaggressions, physical violence for Asian communities. And I really liked that. And I didn't feel alone during that time. I didn't feel like just as an employee. And it really kept me psychologically sane, because I felt so alone during this time. And I appreciated Cerritos College reaching out either privately or making a public statement of anti-Asian hate and stop with the anti-Blackness and all of that. And those healing circles that gave me a voice to really say, hey, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm feeling. And I appreciate your support and actually physically reaching out to me via email, or if they have my phone number, the phone call. And that's what made me feel that Cerritos College actually cared, and that civic dialogue and transparency was there. And it just really overwhelmed me with such high hopes that there are people in the world, faculty and administrators at Cerritos College that care. And they're not just saying it and checking out a box. Especially for me personally, with a lot of the anti-Asian hate, I can't change the way I look. I can't, you know, even if I speak English out there, I'm still a target. But I really appreciated at least the support and the transparency and just being real. Dr. Moreno talked about being real with people, and I just wanted to say I appreciated that. So yeah, I'm sorry for babbling, but thank you for that, Cerritos College. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kendrick. So last thing, and Kimberly, I don't know if you want to introduce this, or I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Patty. Yeah,
Okay.
we got 2 minutes left, so.
So what we're going to do before we end here, we would love for you to add your reflections and feedback, what you actually had or got out of this today with regard to insights and appreciations and learning. And then also, I need questions remaining or more support needed. So this again is going to really help us as we look to future kinds of events that we're organizing. And then lastly, I just want to mention, next week, again, we will be using the same link, same time, same format that we did today, but we're going to be listening to or welcoming Elizabeth Clay Roy, CEO, Generation Citizen, and she's coming out of New York. Her presentation will be Rebuilding Democracy Through the Collective Power of the Nation's College Students. A lot of emphasis on the power of young people. So again, I really, really hope that you'll be able to attend next week as well. I think you're going to enjoy her very much.
Yeah, what I appreciate about this in particular, Patty, is it's juxtaposed with like someone out of academia, but now we have someone out of like at the nonprofit world, right? Who's working
exactly.
in this space. So it's trying to give multiple perspectives on the subject of democracy, right? And education for democracy. So I'm going to stop sharing now. You are free to stay on the document and put your thoughts in and continue. And we're so glad that you were able to join us today. And thank you so very much for your time, not only 1 hour, but 2 on a Friday. So we really appreciate you being here and hope you'll find the time to continue to join us through all of the dialogues, which we have 6 total. So we're going all the way through the first week of November, right before the holidays hit. So have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll hopefully see you next Friday, everyone.
Thanks very much for joining us.